What this movie does masterfully is seeing the escalation from two fronts. One, of the situation of honest citizens, law enforcement and legal services beginning to turn the tide on organized crime in the city after the fall of Falcone in Batman Begins. And two, how Batman's presence and actions in Begins brought out the rise of the Joker. Also, it's kind of refreshing in a sense not to have an origin story for the Joker for a change. Most people that know comic book lore, backstories, origins know of Joker's tale in the same vein as that of Spider-Man, Superman, and of course Batman. We've been there and done that. So to have an air of mystery surrounding this take on the Joker is interesting, as this allows the audience to use their imagination more. Although it has been theorized that he may have been a CIA informant, as during the interrogation scene with Bat he says,
"Never start with the head, the victim gets all fuzzy. He can't feel the neck."
So he must have experience in interrogating people. That and the idea that it's simply face paint instead of bleached out skin, as that does mean he'd be able to blend into the background more in moments he chooses not to use said face paint, such as the assassination attempt on the mayor, and it's one of the few times we're able to see Heath Ledger more clearly. Back to the theme of escalation. With each act, Joker carried out, it upped the ante every time he did it. First, it was robbing the mob bank, then it was party crashing Bruce's fundraiser for Dent, and then it was taking Gordon out, or so we thought, and blowing up an inmate in MCU lockup, and probably along with Marvel's recent take-ins to boot, and then attempting to blow up two different ferries with his social experiment, whether the good people of Gotham would have the stomach to blow up inmates, or would the inmates potentially be just as callous to blow up innocent free citizens. What surprised me is a nameless inmate stepped forward, instructing the warden with calm conviction on what to do, before promptly throwing out the trigger. Okay folks, let's just be honest here a minute, just you, me and us. Are you really gonna argue with Debo? Joker's plan was to bring chaos and anarchy to the city, as that is what he lived for, as I think he resented what Batman was trying to do in being the difference maker in bringing control back to honest people. And what I found to be very profound is how Bat took the fall for Dent's actions, so all of Harvey's work would not be in vain, as if the city knew of his crimes, they would set every criminal free. Now, I'm not defending Harvey in this situation, but think about this. When you've had half your face scarred due to burns and losing the love of your life, I think it would send you off the deep end. Again, don't condone it, but I get it. It remains one of the best comic book movies to this date, and the writing proves it. I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for this, but you come to this review series for my honest take on movies. I think Bale was one of the weakest performers. Hear me out. The gravelly voice seemed more forced and contrived than usual. When you hear him use his Batman voice in Begins, it's subtle. It's a lower register in his voice to distinguish himself from his Bruce Wayne tone, and people wouldn't put two and two together.
Flash knows.
He won't talk.
He'll talk to me.
But here, it's like either he or Nolan just told him to almost get silly with it. It's not so bad in the bank scene with Gordon.
Some of the marked bills I gave you.
My detectives have been making drug buys with them for weeks. This bank was another drop from the mob, that makes 5. We found the bulk of the dirty cash.
Time to move in.
But as it wore on, it really began to grate. Thankfully, this is something that they would correct in The Dark Knight Rises, where he reverted to the register he used in Begins. Remember when I said in the 15th anniversary of Batman Begins that this next scene would spawn memes of infinity?
Where were the other drugs going?
I never knew. I don't know. I swear to God.
Swear to me!
Well, it continues with this.
Where are they?
Killing is making a choice.
Where are they?
Ugh. While I appreciate that this is well acted out with Bat essentially losing control and becoming volatile, the excessive shouting really didn't do it for me. Robert De Niro once said, "Powerful men do not shout. Someone is more sinister when they're either being real quiet with their delivery or you don't hear them at all." And taking into account that Bat is supposed to represent a figure of the shadows, This is a really contrasting and contradictive aspect of the character. As Bruce Wayne, he plays up the act of a playboy bachelor perfectly with the arrogant swagger he uses as a facade to lead people off the scent. Kane reprises his role as the surrogate father figure to Bruce and one of Batman's trusted confidants. He really provides the necessary common sense and logic when Bruce is trying to figure out the situation with the Joker, and says something that not only sums up the Joker, but something most people have quoted to describe people that only want anarchy.
Some men aren't looking for anything logical, like money. They can't be bought, bullied, reasoned, or negotiated with. Some men just want to watch the world burn.
Arguably the one who stole the show with this very different and iconic performance of the clown Prince of Crime. What I think is exemplary of the late actor is that he didn't even try to mimic his predecessor in Jack Nicholson in any way. Nicholson's portrayal in 1989 is iconic for different reasons, but equally iconic. For Ledger, the late actor really committed to the role in cutting himself off from contact with people in order to get into the mind of this persona he would be taking on, as the mannerisms and nuances are very different from roles he's undertaken before, from 10 Things I Hate About You and A Knight's Tale. But that's the thing about method actors, they really study the characters they're looking to portray so that when you see them perform on screen, they cease to be who they normally are and they become said characters. In a similar vein to RDJ as Sherlock Holmes, you're not seeing Robert Downey Jr., you're seeing a very flawed and eccentric take on Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's character. When he's Tony Stark, you can't tell if he's playing Stark or just being himself. You can make the argument that Eckhart achieved just as much in his role as Dent as Ledger did with the Joker, as you see the fall from grace that Dent made in the Joker's plan to show someone as good as Harvey could fall with the death of Rachel Dawes. You do see very small subtle glimpses of Dent's fall into insanity and darkness with the way he assaults a member of the mob in court, and the way he's interrogating one of the Joker's followers with the crazed look in his eyes. He also says something that's just as profound as Alfred's assessment of the Joker.
You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
But enough about Hulk Hogan. Gary really grew more into the role of Gordon as you see him more confident in his performance and becoming more authoritative and in control of the situation even when chaos is breaking loose. The trust in his alliance with Batman grows more as you see how they act more like a team when he leaves the Joker with the Dark Knight in the interrogation room. Small little bit of trivia. The mustache is actually Gary's in this sequel, whereas the mustache he had in Begins was actually a glued-on prosthetic. Maggie replaces Katie Holmes as Batman and Dent's love interest. As I said 3 years ago, I've warmed to Katie's performance over time, but I think Maggie was the better Rachel as she's calm, composed, and confident. I really love the fact that Freeman's Fox was brought more into the fold as essentially Batman's Q, with the upgrades that he had to his suit and the witty rapport they have.
How will it hold up against dogs?
We talking Rottweilers or Chihuahuas? Should do fine against cats.
No doubt that was a nod to Selena Kyle. This is a Christopher Nolan film, so you know he's going to be more practical and take said practical effects more seriously. The fact they actually flipped the truck for real is amazing in its own right, as most other studios would CG it. But he committed to the practical and it really does add more to the scene with Joker against bats. The visual effect of Harvey's scarred face, which had been achieved through skin grafting and then superimposing the final look through post-production, is probably the most hauntingly gruesome look of Two-Face ever seen on film. More so than Tommy Lee Jones's look, but then you have to remember that was done for a camp and more comedic effect, whereas with Nolan, he goes for the heightened reality. The destruction of the Tumbler Batmobile allowed the creation of the Batpod to come into play, as Nolan didn't want to reuse the Batmobile. And so to see the pod emerge from the remains of the Tumbler looked photoreal when you consider it was applying some visual effect aesthetics that you would see in Bayformers. Ooh. Folks, as a car guy, that really hurt to see what happened to the Batmobile. Oof. The Batsuit was redesigned for the movie for the same reason in the story. Both the character and the actor wanted to be more mobile, as when you consider the latex is hot and very weighted, it would allow Bale and Bats to do what they needed to do. If the music reflected and heightened the tone of the previous entry and helping it separate itself from the former series, then James Newton Howard and Hans Zimmer expanded on what had been established with Begins, and like with the theme of escalation, they really heighten the threat that is now facing Gotham and Batman. Howard worked on the theme for Dent, on how he starts out as a symbol of hope before descending into moral corruption. Zimmer worked on Bats and Joker. Batman's theme is as we know it from the previous entries, so we have that familiarity. Joker's theme is really unsettling, where the tension builds in the strings used in the score, especially in one scene where he was playing possum and holds the mob leader at knife point, and you hear the tension break when he makes his kill and then the mobster falls to the floor. This is a really good score composition, as it puts the audience on edge, just as the characters are feeling it on screen. The movie received critical acclaim. Alongside Iron Man, had redefined the potential of superhero films by combining comic book tropes with real-world events. From Roger Ebert. Peter Travers praised Ullman's skill in making a virtuous character interesting, and he, among others, described Kane's and Freeman's performances as effortless. Ledger was praised for his performance, and many reviews said it outshone Jack Nicholson's magnificent performance, and considering the portrayal he gave in '89, that was no easy task. Ledger won the film's only awards at the 15th Screen Actors Guild Awards, the 62nd British Academy Film Awards, and the 66th Golden Globe Awards for Best Supporting Actor. He also won an Oscar at the 81st Academy Awards for Best Supporting Actor, and might I add, deservedly so. His line of, "Why so serious?" is considered one of the most quotable movie lines today, along with the amount of times he would retool the story of my father in how he got his scars. The movie took in $1.006 billion against a budget of $185 million. Adjusted for 2023 inflation and The Dark Knight's box office takings, would now be worth $1.421 billion. The sequel in 2012's The Dark Knight Rises followed in as the concluding chapter in the Dark Knight trilogy, ending the 8-year journey of Batman's reboot. Since 2008, the movie has been treasured on DVD, Blu-ray, and 4K. I'm MJ Knight, and this was The Dark Knight.
Next time on Real Features, Children of the Night. After dark descends upon us, we recount the tale of the King of Vampires in the 1992 Gothic romantic horror, Bram Stoker's Dracula. How will this fabled legend be seen after crossing 31 years of time? Bram Stoker's Dracula. 31 years the legend. Coming soon to After Dark.